like that. So it looks like things are changing. So that's all I have. So with that, if you all will indulge me, and per the superintendent, we're going to move the order of things. And first, we're going to go right into the school building presentation and vote. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Vivian.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you for having us tonight. We are excited to present to you some of the options and what was selected by the school building committee as the preferred option to move forward for the town of Swampscott. All right. First, I wanted to kind of give you guys a little history of where we have been and where we are going. Currently today, October, what are we, the 19th, we are getting ready to submit our preferred schematic report submission to the MSBA. As you might be aware, the MSBA is a partner with the town in providing financial assistance as well as guidance for the educational needs for the town and ensuring that the project is successful and done smoothly and adhering to all of the guidelines set forth by the MSBA. We already have almost concluding our feasibility study. Back in July, we submitted our preliminary design program and received comments and feedback from the MSBA, which we then developed further. Last week, the school building committee was presented with various options, as well as throughout the many months leading up to this point, have had several opportunities for questions, answers, deliberation, and I know that it was not an easy task for them, but they were able to make a selection for a preferred schematic, which we will be moving forward with to the MSBA. Once we make our submission, we await for the MSBA to review all of our documentation. I'm positive they will be providing feedback and having questions where we'll in turn respond in kind. Once we have approval from the school, Massachusetts School Building Authority to move forward, dubbed as the MSBA to move forward, we will enter into schematic design. We anticipate about April, May timeframe that we should be concluding our schematic design and submitting to the MSBA once again. And every step of the way, the MSBA definitely takes account into all of our submissions, and we seek their approval. Based off of the schematic design submission, we will present in June to the MSBA board for approval. And upon approval, about September timeframe, we look for the town to have their formal vote. And fingers crossed, all goes well, and we are able to move forward with the school project. Any questions about our schedule before I move forward?
I'd like to add something.
Sure.
You know, we were able to squeeze about 1 full month of community discussion into this and still, get to the same deadline right here. And I'd have to say that that was a really, really smart decision, a lot because of COVID, and a lot because people don't really talk until they realize that this is really happening. And the last month of meetings and community forums and discussions were very powerful, and we made a lot of changes because of those. So I just want to thank people for having that idea and showing that kind of patience.
Thank you, Lee. That is absolutely true. We were set to have our submission done earlier in the month of October, and we were able to successfully push it back to the end of October to allow for all of the conversation in town and with the abutters to develop. So some of the community, every step of the way, as Lee mentioned, we always made sure to listen to the community, to engage the community in every way possible, granted with some limitations due to the current situation. But from the very onset, we heard and listened from the community, and we deemed these 4 pillars as the primary pivotal pillars that encompass education, site and traffic, sustainability, and community. All of these are prominent within all of the preferred options that we brought forth to the school building committee and among the conversation as we looked at various options. These are also what we heard from the committee and the group and all of the community at large in Swampscott on what they felt was the most important to them in looking at these projects. They're not just about a school project, even though that is first and foremost an educational building, but the site and traffic was a real concern on where logistically it would be placed and what it would do as a result to abutters and the neighborhood, as well as ensuring that sustainability goals were met at all of these locations and having community space. So some of the educational goals that we had set forth very early on as our guiding principles was equity, inclusion, and excellence. It was important to have all the align the grades district-wide and to improve student placement as a result. Even though we would be aligning all the district-wide grades, we still needed to create small learning neighborhoods so that students and teachers felt like a smaller group and not get lost in a larger environment. By doing so, we would also reduce class sizes in the primary grades and improve scheduling and resources more efficiently. There would be more support faculty for collaboration spaces. With the school building committee, as well as the superintendent and all of her resources, felt that by improving all of these, we would definitely be meeting towards our goal of equity, inclusion, and excellence. We definitely had a traffic study for all of the options, and I'm going to ask Lee to go into a little bit more depth of how we arrived at some of these.
Well, because Swampscott is not the largest town, 3 square miles or so, doing a traffic study for 5 different sites at the time really entailed looking at doing a traffic study of your whole town in a way. So you can see that our traffic engineer really looked at the whole idea of, in the first diagram, of student densities and where most of the students lived. And then they looked at the idea of vehicular volumes, meaning like, your main streets and where all the cars seem to be, versus student density. And she had a safety analysis done. And on the right, there's this kind of areas in orange of accidents. And, they're really on the main streets that you know of. If you look at the bottom middle, you're going to see what we're calling the golden triangle. One of the first things we learned is that within that area, things were pretty safe, which was, the middle school, Stanley School and Hadley School. And a lot of families and students live there. And if you tried to put the school on either side of Humphrey or Route, I forget, or on the other side of the DPW site, they all had to cross a dangerous street. So I just wanted you to know that even from the beginning, we were looking at this holistically and narrowing our choices. Did you want me to say more, Vivian? I think that's pretty good.
No, my computer is, just give me 1 second.
That's all right. I think people have seen the traffic study before and know that we've
There we
gone
go.
crazy. Did you want me to talk to this for a second?
Sure.
Okay. We knew that sustainability was important and especially energy efficiency and cost of operating costs in the future. But by establishing a town sustainability committee, which actually involved people from open space and people from the renewable committee and things like that, and and your facilities director. What we did was we developed 4 basic things that are really important to your town. One is just plain old energy efficiency. And we're going for a very low target EUI, which is energy usage. We're going for utility incentives. We're going to look at high performance envelopes. This building is going to be built really, really well. Open space and site resources is so important in your town. You have very little open space, and what you have, you want to protect. And even if we create different spaces or new open space, we wanted to create quality space. So not all paved things, but things where people could use them and connect. And we need to protect site resources, meaning things like water and wetlands and forests and things like that. With COVID, it just reminds us all how important interior environment and wellness is. In this case, air quality. Our office actually did a study for the town about your other schools, how you can try to move in. And we'll be obsessed with air quality. And I personally am obsessed with interior daylighting, because I think that that is what makes an environment. So, and lastly, but not leastly, operation, maintenance, and life cycle. These are the costs to operate your school in the future. One wonderful thing about having one school that does it all is that we can try to do this right. And you won't have to worry about all the other schools and keeping them running, because we can get them all going at the same time. Okay. My understanding is that some of you hadn't been here on Thursday. So as you all understand, I hope you all understand, we had 3 columns. We had kind of the idea of a K through 4, Hadley only is those first 2. We had a second 2 options that we focused on, which were 3 through 5s for district. And we had a third column on the right, which was district K through 5, which was both on Stanley. So in one of our first meetings about 2.5 weeks ago, we discussed these and we limited the number of options. Click. See if this works. It does. And the idea was we would not look at a renovation option for Hadley because it was just absurdly expensive and not good for education. And the middle school site was right out. And then we had the big discussion about the 3 through 5 really on Hadley and district K through 4. Click. And those 2 went away, and we ended up on last Tuesday, we ended up having that vote. It was unanimous, which was really very powerful, that a district K through 4 was the most logical choice, the most thoughtful choice for education and other things, and also the most economically feasible choice. And I think that the finance committee and looking at taxes in the long run and other schools that had to be built or repaired really bore this out. And I'm not the one to speak to those things, but I'm sure that many of you know all about the finances. So on Thursday night, we had a very interesting secondary conversation. This conversation was to look at 2 options that we had drawn up to see which one was probably the best one to send to the MSBA and which was our preferred scheme. I will tell you that neither of these 2 options existed a month ago. We had a different option that we were showing over and over, or a couple of options. And after listening to the community, listening to the neighbors talk about this site and all of the pressures on it, we came up with 2 more approaches that we felt would satisfy them, or at least, address all of their issues. And I know for sure that some of the neighbors are very appreciative of that. Next.
Agreed. I just wanted to also reiterate that the options that were made and submitted to the MSBA during the preliminary design development phase, neither one of these options were in existence, and as a result were not submitted. But based off of conversations and really listening to the abutters and the community at large, these two options were developed, and where the school building committee agreed that the previous iterations would not necessarily be the best use of the space, and instead one of these would be. Therefore, we introduced two new ones.
Or did we do the right thing? I just have to.
I agree.
In hindsight, we really did the right thing, and I'm very pleased. And then on Thursday, and I'm going to show you a couple things after this, but on Thursday, option 2 was again unanimously voted upon as the preferred option. And if you'll give me a few minutes, I'll tell you what I heard as to the criteria and the reasons why. Does that make sense? Just really quickly, option 1. Option 1 was the idea of having, you would drive, in all of these options, you drive in right on Whitman and you enter the site. And in option 1, the whole idea was that whole purple area in the front. That area right there was, let me just show you. This area right here is 2 stories and 1 story tall. And the whole idea of that was so that when you drove in, you saw a smaller scale building, and for the neighbors, they felt the difference in scale and height. In the back, remember we have 2 schools in a way. We have the 3-story schools. One of them is the upper school, and one of them is the lower school. And the whole idea is they have their own entries, and you can see the entries, and you can go to your world of worlds. So right away, we're separating, say, a maximum of 900 into much less in terms of cohorts, neighborhoods, and populations. What you're going to find on all of these schemes is that we're putting every floor on different ones, and we'll show it, is a grade. In this one, what's wonderful, and again, it'll be the same on the next scheme. You'll see all the kindergartens. Well, there's actually 9 sections now with a resource room in the middle. And those are big 1,200 square foot kindergarten classrooms on the ground, opening to play space, 2 more sections. And it was very important to Pam that kindergarten and 1st grade have more classrooms and smaller class sizes. So we've accomplished that. Next. Click. I don't know who's in charge. There you go. Thank you. So this is just the 2nd floor. And if you look at it, you'll see that there's a 3rd grade wing and a 1st grade wing. So it's those 2 wings kind of going up, and one's lower and one's upper. Also notice that in all of these schemes, you're going to see these things called FX. These are common breakout areas. And that's so that you can take 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 3, and 4 classrooms, bring them together, and have kind of STEM or art or any kind of breakout space. And once again, not only have we broken down that into a grade, we've broken it down into smaller sections, which should really help with special education and breakout and other cohorts. Next. And on the upper floor, this is where it's actually 3 floors. And I did these sketches. If you see on the right, there's this kind of sketch because people were very, very concerned about heights. So it shows how we kind of have a 1-story, a 2-story height in the front, stepping up, and how we hide the 3rd floor in the back in order to fit. This is not a huge site, but it is the biggest site that you can build on in all of Swampscott. So, we want to use it very well. So I just wanted you to see this design, which I liked a real lot. But then what happened was when we actually met last Thursday and all the questions came in from the SBC, it really changed everyone's opinion. It changed my opinion. Next. So this is there's an interesting story behind this option that was actually chosen in the end. We were standing on the site, a few of us from the SBC, and we were doing that balloon test and looking at it. And somebody said, this building is very tight on the site, and how do we make it, in a perfect world, we would probably just put it along the back here. This is a 3-story building. It steps from 1 to 2 and up to 3. But when we look at the site itself, the thing that we really learned was that this wall of trees from Ewing Woods in the back, that's like 65 feet tall. And if you could push the building up against close to that, it made it feel nestled in there, and it made it feel smaller, and it made it feel to scale. It also got you a lot further away from Whitman, so when you came in, there was a lot of space when you came in. So for all those reasons, we decided to look at this scheme. It did necessitate that we actually take down the existing Stanley School, which is right here. We would have to take down the existing Stanley School in order to build it. But one of the arguments was, you're going to be building this for the next 50, 75 years. If there's a better place to put it on the site, let's be creative and figure out, how to deal with temporary conditions and things like that and get it right. Because no one will ever know that you were trying to save this school in 50 years when they say this doesn't work. It's something to think about. So what we did was we have, in this particular case, we have a scheme where you come in Whitman and you would drive along like this, and we're trying to create queuing length, and you drop off all along here. Queuing length is really important. It's a number of cars. And what we're trying to do is keep it definitely off of Nason, but with our traffic studies, most of the time we can keep it all on the site, even in this scheme, which has a slightly shorter queuing. And that's really important. And we studied this over and over and over. But also remember that this necessitates, in the afternoon, 2 different dismissal times. So the lower school in this one and the upper school would let go maybe 25 minutes or whenever you want a different time, so that the cars would come through, pick up, because in the afternoon people park for a long time. So you want to kind of stagger that. And that staggering, if we do that, can really be a game changer here. In terms of this whole site, this is the real flow. You come through, and our goal has always been, well, we've tried so many different ways of coming back out of the site. We felt that and traffic felt that during the busy times, meaning drop off and pickup, may not be a great idea for people to come in and out of Whitman at that same time. That's a lot of cars. So we wanted to slide through. We've stayed away from Forest Ave Extension as a place to come out. That is only an emergency / service entrance. Okay, so it's an emergency way out or in. And we'd wanted to do that because it's a small street. And if you go down that street, you end up at the crazy intersection by Humphrey that everybody hates. And maybe someday you'll all do something about it, who knows? But the truth is that it's not a great place to have lines of cars from. So this was really the most pragmatic thing. A couple other really good things about this scheme that just kind of grew. The idea that the field could still be over in this area. Right now, it's kind of the other direction, but we could have a wonderful field. And what's good about that is that it really keeps the neighbors that are over in this area, it gives them that whole buffer where they have tree buffers, and we're going to put lots of trees around there, but we also give them a space buffer. Almost nobody is even close to the school at this point by pushing it to this area over here. Lastly, I wanted to say that educationally and the way that you set up a building, this is the sun coming in that way from that side. Do you see that arrow? And it's really important for us to have our classrooms on either side facing north and south. That's a big energy rule of thumb for daylighting and for energy consumption and things like that. For those of you who have been teachers in the past, west light is the worst light. You get that kind of, when you're teaching in a class and you get that strafing west hot light in it, you can't read your whiteboard and stuff. So we just want you to know that there's a lot of thought goes into this. And then lastly, in the middle, This is all the public stuff. So you have two administration areas. So you come in one side or you come in the other. You have your own lobby. And the kids only cross when they go to the main stuff. And that's probably normal, you know, for everybody. So it's a really simply laid out building. Services in the back, you don't see it. You know, it's not bad at all. Next. As you go up, you end up having the upper level of the cafeteria, because remember, this is with a stage. This is not just a cafeteria. This is a place where you can have events, and it's 2 stories. So it's really important that they have wonderful windows, and it's a big space. And then you have, on your left, you have your lower school with your 1st grade and all of those wonderful common and breakout spaces. And on the right, you have your 3rd and 4th grade on those levels going up. I also want to point out little things like that I think you'll appreciate, is the idea that you can kind of look out. And you kind of look out. If I put the stairs there and I make them doors and glass and stuff, you always know where you are and you can see through the building in a lot of places. I think that's going to be really important for the kids to understand where they are and to get daylight and to see the trees. And then on the last level is where we, in this particular case, we actually have put the gym on the 3rd level, stacked on top of the cafeteria, because that way we can have the largest piece against where you don't see the height right here. And in the front, we actually put the makerspace, which is kind of a wonderful art room, and a terrace on the roof. We've seen, many of you have seen lots of pictures. Remember the picture of the makerspace, and then there was a big garage door, and then the kids were out on the roof and they were doing study in STEM and stuff. We want to replicate that, and we think that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Next. There should be a, yeah, here's the picture. So this is, in a way, this is what this building in terms of massing or heights could look like. There's always kind of a 1st floor zone where the kindergarten and the little kids are, and then it steps back for the next couple zones. In the front, you'd have a terrace and a lower. The entries could be 1 story to kind of bring you in. And then the really tall stuff in the very back where you wouldn't see it, but it could be up in the trees in a way. I could be in the gymnasium, which is more of a kid gymnasium, have some windows and look out into the trees and have daylighting come in. So that could be really wonderful. And lastly, we're always going to try to bring light down through the building into those spaces. And I have some decent ways of thinking about that. Next. So just to make this super easy for you, we, David and I, the other architect, decided to put together what the reasons for the decision the other night. It couldn't be easier. Click. See, so what we did was we put option 1 on the left and option 2 on the right. And we had a whole bunch of questions from the SBC. And we did research on each one of them. And these are the arrows that tell you which of these did this better each time. They asked us which felt like it would be less imposing or have a smaller scale. And we actually felt that because this building, even though it was a little taller at some points, had that distance and was further away from the entrance, and the other one was right there, that would actually feel more imposing. Which of them had a more efficient footprint? Well, it turns out that option 2 has a smaller footprint because it's almost all 3 stories, while option 1 had a 2-story section in the front. So it was actually 10,000 square feet larger in footprint. And 10,000 square foot will really come in handy on a site like this. I think everybody agreed with that. Which had a better entry and views? Well, you would come in here, it's a little bit tight. It's interesting on the option 1, but on option 2, once again, you look across, even though it's kind of uphill a little bit, but you look across and you see the whole building and you see the entries and you know where to go. Which one was further from the neighbors? Well, most of the neighbors, I hope I'm doing this right for you. Most of the neighbors are over here. And we have the one neighbor over here. But you can see we tried to pull back on option 1, but the truth is option 2 is much further away from those neighbors. And we'll do everything we can for the one neighbor here to buffer them and to protect them. So once again, there's another winner. Which had better perimeter buffers? They're kind of similar, the idea of buffering from the neighbors, but I will point out, one neighbor told me the next day, one neighbor called me up and told me he was appreciative of what we had done. On option 1, he lives kind of over here. He really did not like the road kind of coming around like this. It meant a bunch of cars were coming by his house. And as you can see, option 2 does not do that. It's very natural and still the field. And so in that way, it was a better perimeter. Option 2 had more open and play space. It has a better field, better area for field up here than the island on the other one. And then it just has more play space because it has a smaller footprint for the building. And so that gave you more space. Which one was better educationally? We asked Pam, and she said, they're both great. You know that we did a lot of talking with faculty and worked with Pam and her leadership on what kind of spaces with the MSBA, and we really feel like we understand the adjacencies and the educational purpose for either one. Sustainability-wise, they're both very similar. We could make either one of them wonderful. And which is better for community use? Well, at least especially on the inside, they're identical. You know, you can kind of use either, all the spaces are the same. And then which has a simpler vehicular flow through the site? Well, option 2, once again, kind of was more intuitive, just in and out. And we're also looking, if you look at this, we're looking at the idea that on off hours, maybe we put a little connector road like this, so people can loop, and maybe we even do gate off the, the church here during non-drop off or pickup times when Whitman can handle the whole load. So we were looking at that too, and that's something we'll talk about. It's true that option 1 had more queuing length than did option 2. But it also has all this length of drive around the building, which quite honestly is we're just trying to get around the building to the exit, and it's pretty useless. This one doesn't have that. We were thinking, you might appreciate this. There's also a way for us to think about going like this, and on rainy days or something, kind of doing something like this, where we create maybe a paved area back there where it could be opened up and people could come along and extend the queue. We'll look at that with our landscape architect and see if that, and traffic, to see if that helps this option perform better, only during the worst of circumstances, which again is rainy day when everybody's picking up. A lot of people asked about rock and fill removal. So what that means is that, is there people are worried about blasting, rightly so, or just rock removal. On this site, in this area, if you can all see that, that's where the highest point and the highest ledge is. The environmental surveys that we have right now tell us that for the first few feet, it's the kind of ledge that you can actually scrape away with machinery rather than blasting. So if we lower this area, we'd actually have to do that the same on both sites. So in many ways, it's a wash. But where the two sites differ, or the two options differ, is that this building on the left, the option 1, tries to build a building over here. And over here on option 2 is a field. That's kind of a big distinction, because it turns out that that area over there has a lot of what is called unsuitable fill. We don't have the exact measurements or anything, but what happened is when they built that field, they kind of brought in a lot of stuff, and then they built up the field nice and high. You know how it drops off towards the houses in the back, so radically. So you can tell that somebody just kind of filled it. And there's stuff in there that you wouldn't want to build a building on. You wouldn't support a building. You'd have to take it out and then bring in what's called structural fill. That can be an expensive thing. But on this one, in option 2, we have a much better chance of just reusing what's there, maybe putting on some new soil on top and regrading it, because we're not building on top of it. I hope that's not too much detail, but this is the reason they made their decisions. And then lastly, environmental impact. We feel like both of them are about the same. It's true that this option 2, you don't see as much of the trees in the back. But I feel like, remember, the true nature of it is that there's woods all back here. And it's really the relationship of creating those little play spaces back here and making them intimate and making them beautiful. And I think that what we're really doing is creating a new facade. So I feel like they're about the same. And people were worried about whether we were going to protect wetlands and protect conservation land in Ewing Woods. And the answer is yes, and we have to, and we want to. I mean, those places have to be handled very, very carefully, and we will. For all of those reasons, as you can see, almost all of the arrows ended up pointing this way, and it became a bit of a landslide, which was a little unexpected for very logical reasons. And also, I would say, reasons that were beneficial and thoughtful to the neighborhood as best as we can. We can't change the size of the building. It's still a K-4, 900 kids. We can do some things with traffic, but where we put the building on the site and how we handle that, we had control over. And therefore, that's what we came up with. And really, that's all I wanted to say. So I hope that kind of gives you the parameters. There's really nothing else. There's other slides, but they're just in case you have a question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I've got a question. I've actually got a couple of questions.
Go ahead, Amy.
So the first one is about that sort of back right corner
Yes.
where there is potentially an emergency services entrance. Is that, and I'm not sure if you guys would be able to answer this, but so maybe Pam and Suzanne, is that not unlike that back entrance to the high school?
Well, let's go back right there. I don't,
all
this
the-
one?
Yes.
Well,
So,
I can't describe
Amy,
it versus the high school. Go ahead.
I was just going to say it's like the high school in that it'll be gated, 99.9% of the time. But unlike the high school, sometimes when there's events at the high school, it gets opened and we dump a lot of traffic out of the greenway, like after town meeting and stuff. I don't think this little road could handle that kind of exodus. So I think we're just going to keep that one. I think the intent is to keep that one closed except for emergency vehicles and not traffic.
All right. Well, that's good. That was actually my question is to.
Amy, you may remember there were a lot of questions about walking and bike riders, and they come up Forest Ave Extension, and we wanted to make it really safe for them to be able to come in like that.
That's great.
Cool.
Okay. My second question also relates to that back area. And obviously that's where the Forest Avenue extension comes in. But so are we saying that all along that whole lot, is that all woods? There's no houses back there?
Right here? That's a house.
Essentially from where the bottom right corner of the school all the way to the bottom left corner. You're referring to.
Oh yeah, that's all Ewing Woods. So let me do this. All of this, right? All the way across. Can you see that?
Yep.
All of that is Ewing Woods going right out, right back down the page.
Wow. Okay.
And it's wonderful and beautiful and all that.
All right.
Yeah, and you can walk
Isn't
all
that
through there,
great?
Amy. There's like trails and stuff.
Yeah, no, I've been back there, but it's been a while, so it's hard to remember where the houses lie.
Right.
Yeah, the houses don't start till here, like that.
Okay. All right, and then I
Thank
had
you.
one other question, which was in the hallways, and you were talking about the like breakout space where it says FX,
Yes,
and in there are all those little boxes. What are those?
that's awesome. I don't know if we can zoom in or if I should sketch something. So what those are breakout spaces. Let's go to the next floor up. Let's go look to the right. See, if you look to the right, you see fourth grade. And what we have are these are breakout spaces. And what they are is these wonderful little conference-y like rooms for 4 to 6 kids. And those are located, and there's a couple per grade or, you know, things like that, different sizes. And those are places where you can either break out a few kids, you can have a teacher's meeting, you can have some special education breakout. They also are adjacent, if you notice, to those open spaces. So that, you know, right here, so that they can be used in conjunction with the classroom, with the breakout space, and with that open space. And then sometimes we have a couple of toilets there, so that so that every single grade has its own little toilets, which is something asked for. Just so you know, kindergarten and first grade have more. Kindergarten actually has one in every room. So those are what we would call, in terms of 21st century learning, those are collaboration zones. And while it looks really small right here, Amy, it's actually really big. From here to here in that space, 20, 16 is like 36 feet. Huh. And this from the width of this is like 25 feet. So what we're doing here is we have hallways, but hallways always become more than a hallway. So we no longer just do hallways, we do places where you are and you can work and you can live and you can like have stuff, learning everywhere. Even in a place where it looks like it's just some hallway, that's display and that's more storage and it's more stuff. So that is the dynamic nature of how these neighborhoods, that's a neighborhood. And that's a neighborhood, and how that really works to make learning much more intimate and grouping smaller. I love talking about this stuff, so thank you.
And so I would imagine, especially because the superintendent's been a part of this, that those are like little, almost like enclosed spaces. So there aren't kids like learning in the hallways.
Well, there'll be spaces like that where there's glass. So what we do is we create different levels of privateness. So sometimes you might have an area where it's like kind of closed off, but this one might have a lot of glass. And then this area is open, but it's where you actually bring the kids out to do like some STEM work with somebody who comes in and they do some more collaborative nature work, you know, that kind of thing, while kids are still in the classroom and that kind of thing. So there's all these levels of permanence, and we haven't established all that. When you look at all the pictures that you've looked at, you'll see glass, and sometimes it's too much. And we do realize that little kids need to be watched. So it's not like a middle school, you say 3 kids go out by yourself. These kids need to be watched and monitored, right? So we always want to have those sight lines.
Amy, I look at them as planned collaborative spaces versus the targeted instructional spaces that are happening in the hall now. So those are 2 very different things to me.
All right. Does anybody else have any questions? You want to jump in?
Amy, I had just a couple.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, John.
Lee, I just had a couple things. Just the first one, just to pick up on something you said about a rooftop deck, and I was just intrigued by that. And I guess just a couple things. Is that something that is typical in an elementary school that allows for it? I guess I'm thinking little kids rooftop deck. I just, you know what I'm saying?
Yes, you don't want it to be something that they can jump off of. So what I would say is this. If we did some kind of rooftop terrace, and again, one of the reasons I did it here is because there'd been pictures from another elementary school, and you guys, some of you visited places where they had something like that, and you really liked it. So what I would say is that what's going to happen is that you're going to end up having, if you do some kind of rooftop thing, you're going to have a very good barrier, probably glass higher than usual, maybe, 42 inches is typical, but it could be 5 feet. Just something so that you're outdoors, but it's very protective, or we keep them away from the edges. There's a lot of things we can do to make it outdoors, but safe. We want to create on the ground, we want to create areas where they can go outside and do some outdoor learning. But a space like this, if there's a maker space, like I'm drawing it in 3D again, a maker space up there becomes like the place where you go, you invent, you're creative, and you look at the world. Do you know what I mean? We can make it safe. When I have holes in the floor a couple times to bring light down in the building, a little bit of light here, like slots, or light down over by where the stairs are, because it's a vertical building, we want to bring light down. We're going to have quite high glass and sometimes some solid barriers and stuff, things that you can't climb, and things that for elementary students won't be scary, or the kind of thing that they'd want to throw something over. That's in the design of it, John. I mean, I can tell you that we've dealt with this before, but it would be a missed opportunity not to try.
All right, thank you, Lee. And my other question was, I in a previous slide of this site, it showed play K-4 in the 4 corners. Is that where like swing sets and things like that would go?
Yeah. Yes. So all of this area, at least right now, right, would be the kind of areas where you come right out of the building and play. And that's interesting because that way the kids can come right out of like kindergarten. If I was on the 2nd floor above the kindergarten, I just come right out this stair and I go right outside. So kindergarten, 1st and 2nd will share those areas, 3 and 4. I don't know if playgrounds are exactly the same as they used to be. I'm sure there'll be, a couple of swings and things like that. But there's also a lot more adaptive or accessible pieces there for all kids of all abilities. And our landscape architect has done a lot of different play areas that you'd be surprised how different and interesting they are. And what I'd like to say is, they kind of look like, what we want to do is we want to keep some of those ideas of the rock ledge, of the water, of the Swampscott kind of place as a theme in these, so that they feel like they are part of your world. You know what I mean? And we want people from the community to help design some of this stuff. You will have 4 square courts, and you will have a field. We're looking at the size of a soccer field and 1 diamond, I think, how they work up here, and like Little League. And that's never going to go away. But I think that, remember, we have all of this nature out here. What I love about this particular scheme is that the playgrounds open right into the woods. Now, we may end up putting a fence there if people ask, but I don't see why. When it opens into the woods, the playground the woods become part of the learning. Remember the rocks right there? There's like these learning rocks right there, because anyone who went to that school at Stanley, and it just really makes it kind of like go out there. Does that make sense? And that way we use the whole place for learning and play.
Okay. Thank you, Lee.
It's hard not to get excited about this stuff because you have, I didn't make you choose this site, but this site has so much to use and to utilize. It's going to be very good for the teachers.
Karen?
I was just going to say that I'm so impressed and glad that we were able to get rid of some sort of old assumptions and re-look at the site in a different way, and just sort of break out. I think we were kind of stuck maybe from the last project and even into this project with what we could do, and this sort of just blows that all away and gives us something that we had never really thought of before, and I think it's awesome.
Karen, there are people who still, feel reticent about having a large school on the Stanley site. And you guys have a year to talk and for us to develop it and to try to answer and help them. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
So it's not all, I mean, we really did open up, and I'm so glad we had that extra time.
Yep. Thank you.
Does anybody else want to? I'm sure you have a million questions, Suzanne.
Yeah, I have tons of unanswered questions.
Would anybody else like to ask anything, or? So what are next steps? Where do we go? Obviously we have the vote, but what should the school committee be thinking about longer term? I mean, I know that this is mostly in the hands of the school building committee, which is not us.
Correct. However, as part of the school committee, it has been deemed that the school, there's a district-wide shift now, where previously you had, smaller K through 4s, and then the middle school grades starting from the 5th grade and the high school. Now you have to make sure that you reevaluate and as well as support the teachers in a slightly different way, where your elementary school grades will all be consolidated. And, just as far as making sure that timing, as far as dismissals, arrivals, there is going to be a little bit of a shift, as Lee mentioned earlier, to offset all of the traffic going in and out of the site. We do want to make it where it's a little bit more ease and consideration for the neighborhood. So we definitely would look for the school committee for support in that, as well as I feel as though the superintendent with all of her leadership team has a good grasp of all of the resources, the educational components necessary, but positive she would have to come to the school committee to look at dismissal and arrival times, as well as what would be a great support for this school would also be increased busing. So I know that we have had several conversations revolving around busing, and typically now the town of Swampscott does a 2-mile radius for busing. We have reviewed and provided preliminary, as well as a little bit beyond preliminary numbers as far as how much traffic can be alleviated off to the site, cars coming onto the site, if we expand it from a 2-mile to, let's say, 1.5 miles, and what it further does if we go 1 mile. So I believe that would be something that the school committee can also support in standing behind the project, in allowing for more busing and for the, the 2-mile radius to kind of be brought down to maybe 1.5 miles to 1 mile even.
I'll say it, if I can add on, Vivian, to what you were just saying. We had a study done, and according to the traffic engineer, to both the middle school and to this school, a 1-mile radius was kind of the sweet spot. And what it did was, if you would end up with about 5 buses, but they would do the middle school and they would do the elementary school at 2 separate times, 2 different runs, if that was the case. And it would lessen the number of cars to both schools by 1/3. So it might sound funny, but like if you think, if people use the buses, and you have to figure out ways to encourage people outside of 1 mile to use the buses. And that would be, so if I had 600 cars to the site, then it becomes 400. That's a huge difference. And then the middle school as well, which already has its own traffic problems. So it's really something to talk about and consider. And I think that you're going to find, as we've heard over and over with the neighborhoods, the people in the neighborhood who are concerned about the number of cars and traffic, that might be a way to tip the scales and to show, to show some movement with them as well. So it's just something you ought to think about. I agree. It costs money though, of course.
But there's also something to be said in having a district-wide consolidated school. It will be more efficiently run, as well as the amount of time and cost associated with saving resources going back and forth to all of the various schools. All of the resources can be consolidated into one building where movement between, one side of the building to the other is a lot less than going from Stanley to Clark or from Clark to Hadley. There's pros and cons, and each action has a reaction and a cost savings method appropriately. Another way that the school committee can support this project moving forward, beyond today, once you as a committee vote in favor to move forward with option 1 or option 2, option 2 for the district-wide K through 2, we will be submitting to the MSBA and the process will go forward. But in the meantime, until the date of the townwide vote in September of next year, to get the message, the support, information out to as many as possible in order to have a more positive response and for a positive vote come in September. It isn't something that, I will speak for the design team as well as for the owner's project management team. We have done a significant amount of work to get to here. We have done very much whatever possible to listen to the community. After all, we don't, for us, we leave the project once it's done, but what we'd like to leave behind is a project that is significant, but yet one that is accepted, approved, and really is what the community wants. And we've taken a lot of opportunities to not only engage the community every step of the way. Every meeting that we have held with the school building committee, we have had a similar meeting a week or two later with the public to notify them of what are the discussion points, as well as what was selected, what was decided, what options there are to move forward with. So continuing that spirit of engagement and helping the school building committee get the voice out, as well as seeking the approval of the community, I think is the best way to support this project going forward. I don't know if I missed anything, but I don't think I did. If I did, please, Lee, chime in.
Well, Vivian, I would say that the two things that are going to be your greatest obstacles that you can help us with is one is traffic, and clearly buses is part of that, and how well we deal with all of this. And the other obstacle is the idea in town still, by those who haven't really attended meetings, that neighborhood schools are a real thing. And I know you guys talk about this a lot, but you really don't have necessarily, you have smaller schools, but you don't have neighborhood schools. People get kind of like moved to all different schools based on special education and other factors. And this school can be built, even though it seems like it's a large population, we break it down, we break it down, and we break it down to work. And so I think that's something you're going to be hearing a lot. And I think it's something that we need to kind of overcome with people's perceptions about education, that this is too big. And where I don't think it's too big, but I think that we have to overcome that. And you guys can help us.
I think you're talking to a group that by and large has overcome that, because we deal with it all the time in the budget and all sorts of school committee issues and building issues and stuff like that. So, I think this vote tonight is really about the process too, and about how thorough we've been with this discussion and vetting the options and agreeing with what the superintendent and the leadership vision was and all that stuff. I don't know if you guys are ready. I think we're ready to make a vote.
I think we are. I think, Suzanne, you've done a great job of representing us and keeping us informed. And I think we've all tried to play our parts where we could and attend the community forums and the educational visioning. and to be a part of it. And, you know, most of us have been around since the last project. So like, I'm ready. I'm ready.
All right. So,
So can I make a motion?
Ann,
Amy?
yeah, can you make the motion?
Yeah, I want to make a motion to accept the recommendation of the school building committee's vote to forward the district-wide K-4 option 2 at the Stanley site to the MSBA.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right. So before we go and take a vote, I do have a statement that I want to read from Ted Delano, who could not be here tonight. He says, a few years ago, when the topic of the poor conditions our elementary schools faced, I asked that the school committee tour each school. These tours were eye-opening, to say the least. We have students learning in closets and hallways. We had staff in desperate need of prep areas. All of us could list the many deficiencies that our children face. Personally, for me, Ted, I was mystified in the manner that our special education students were instructed. I'd like to thank the school building committee for their advocacy on a transparent process. As school committee members, we witnessed firsthand the process evolve. Many tireless hours were spent to make sure the community was heard. I'm aware that there is some opposition to a K-4 building at the Stanley. Moving forward, I hope that we can move through these next phases. We as a community endeavor to support the building. We have an opportunity to have a front row seat in helping the future educational leaders of our community. And if I could, I would vote in favor of the building site. So that was from Ted Delano. Does anybody else want to say anything in particular?
Amy, this is John. I don't have a statement, but I do have some thoughts if you can indulge me for a couple of minutes. And this is more to be reflective of the many, many people I've heard from who actually reached out to me, you know, in the last few weeks, and just some of my own personal views, if you can,
Please.
you know, let me say that. So again, I'm also going to say, acknowledge all the, you know, very, very extensive work that the SBC did and the architects have done over the last couple of years. And I think we're all appreciative of their efforts, their time, you know, to try to find a solution here. My personal preference after looking at these was the Hadley District 3 through 5. And I say that as a direct abutter to Hadley. We can look out our windows and see Hadley right out the window. And even though we're right here, I think long term, I thought that was the better option for Swampscott. It was in keeping with the character of the town, I thought. I thought that going with the K-4 at Stanley, we'd lose a valuable asset over at Hadley. And the sense of community that I know we felt when we first got here, you know, just kind of learning, you know, who our neighbors were and, you know, just meeting, you know, parents of the various kids in the classes. We were able to do that in a smaller setting. So all of those things kind of factored into just, you know, my personal view. And as far as the like I said, the scores of people that I've been in touch with and have reached out to me and I've talked to, I've heard that a lot of them, like the great majority of them, wanted a Hadley option. They wanted to keep Hadley as a school. It's been there for over 100 years. I think the survey results reflected some of that. I also heard from these folks, these parents, that that there was a desire to have fifth grade moved back into the elementary school. That was something I heard quite often. But most of all, what I heard was that Hadley was a central location. It allowed for walking access, the tradition of a school there. And I know everybody here is aware of the petition that went out, 400 people signed. And I just wanted to note that, it was online, but I think about half of those 200, about 200 or so were door-to-door canvassing. So, people actually took the time to put something together, go door to door. And the people who answered the door took the time because they thought it was important enough to provide their views on what they were thinking. So I think that says a lot about, how strongly people feel about this. And I think just the last thing, as far as what I heard, Amy, was that people really wanted the Hadley property factored into this thing. A little bit more as far as keeping it. Again, that's what I heard, and I just wanted to pass that that feedback back to this group. And just as far as the Stanley site, again, I don't think anybody is questioning that we need new buildings. Okay, I don't think there's any debate about that. What I heard about the Stanley, again, just from the many folks I talked to, was that the size was overwhelming for Swampscott. That's a word I heard. We talked earlier about construction disruptions with potential blasting, long-term concerns that people raised about the busing and the traffic. Also, I heard from many retired people who were just concerned with what the costs were going to be, especially as the elderly population increases in Swampscott. And I think what I've not heard very much throughout this, and I know this is a snapshot in time, but I know a lot of people have had setbacks because of the pandemic, and I think that's going to make things even more difficult, as we look forward over the next year. So again, Amy, I support everything the SBC has done and everyone involved, all of their efforts. Again, I personally don't think that the Stanley K-4 district-wide option is really in the best interest of Swampscott at this time. And I'm not sure it would pass a town-wide vote, when it was offered up. So those are my thoughts. Again, thank you for letting me kind of run through a lot of the feedback that I heard. I just wanted to, kind of acknowledge all the people that I had engaged with and had reached out to me, and make sure that their voices got heard. So thank you.
On mute.
John,
Amy, you're on mute.
Karen, did you want to say anything?
Well, I mean, just in terms of that, I understand that people like the 3 through 5. I actually liked it myself. I mean, when we were discussing it, it was beautiful and it was cute, and it solved some of our problems, and it kept that location, and then that way it was sort of traditional and nice, but it didn't solve enough of our problems in my opinion, and I don't think that Swampscott can afford to build 2 buildings. I think that the work that the town did looking at the cost over time sort of answered that question. And also, I'm just not, I can't support a project that would leave us trying to use Stanley for any amount of time, because I mean, I just can't have an elementary school that's not handicap accessible. And we can't wait 10, 15 years or for whenever that would happen. So it's just right out, in my opinion. And I understand people's feelings, but whether we keep Hadley as property for the town of Swampscott is something that we're going to have to deal with separately. And that, I don't think that can be the deciding factor in this project. And people will have to talk to their selectmen and the town and maybe put their advocacy on a project to keep Hadley as some sort of town property, but keep it separate from this. That's my opinion.
I think,
Suzanne?
I mean, just to add to that, I just, like, everyone's heard me talk ad nauseum. So obviously, I support the K-4 option. And I think through this whole feasibility study, the the deficits in the 3 through 5 option have been flushed out. I mean, to the point that the leadership team, talked about the 5th grade in the middle school and why that had originally been part of the educational vision and why that is no longer one of the top priorities. We talked about how the lack of play space to build a school with the lack of play space. I mean, just some other, just leaving the elementary school split, allowing another transition and splitting the elementary school population is a great start, but how it still is going to divide our resources and our specialists and special ed programs having to switch back and forth between buildings. I mean, those things all came to light, but most importantly, I know like the finances is a really big deal. And the fact that seniors and some older people in town and some people on fixed income are really concerned about their money was a huge factor in this decision. We listened to the finance committee flush out a whole bunch of different options, and to build 2 buildings is almost $100 million more than to build 1 building. And we know we need to build another building if we built the 3 through 5. We know that we have immediately have to start on a K through 2 project, or at the very least renovating Stanley and Clark to each be K through 2s, which was equally as expensive or almost equally as expensive and didn't get us what we wanted. So financially, this one makes so much more sense for the people in town to just be building 1 building than the 2. And so, just those reasons alone sort of, I think, tipped the scale for the school building committee. I mean, a lot of whom were really tormented to the end for a lot of the reasons John was saying. But then when you looked at the studies and you started to really listen to the traffic engineer that said, traffic stinks at both, but at least at Stanley, we have ways to mitigate it. And, open space is tight everywhere, but Hadley takes up more open space than Stanley takes up. I mean, when you started comparing them like that, it was just sort of, I think it tipped the scale. And for those reasons, those are the SBC reasons for voting on it, and continue to be my reasons on this committee to vote for it, or to accept the vote of the SBC.
So for me personally, having participated as a parent and as a taxpayer in a number of the community forums, I worked really hard when I went to those to come at it as not a school committee member, but as any other taxpayer might here in town. I was just impressed and appreciated the process that the school building committee used and the amount of community engagement. I think like most of the things that we do and work on, we know that like at the, what feels like the 11th hour, even though it's not the 11th hour, it's like the 6th hour, really, that people are going to wake up and say, I didn't know anything about this, because until you don't know, until you just don't. So I think what tipped the scales for me in terms of this K4 was the level of partnership with the select board and with the finance committee and with the capital improvements committee and with town hall and the obviously the school building committee, that it represented a community and a community decision that I think is so important and as equally important to the process as what the superintendent might want. So in the end, while I might have personal opinions about the building, I think it really sort of pales in comparison to the expertise of those who've been working on this for the last 18 months. So Suzanne, I tip my hat to you and the team that you guys all put together. I can't say that it's not going to be a tough row to hoe, but frankly, I'm not sure that there would be any solution that we could bring to the town that would be easy, because this is a town that likes to say no to everything. There's always somebody here who has a problem with something. And I think that to be able to check as many boxes as you guys have been able to check, it mitigates as much as can be mitigated. So I support the decision that you guys have come to, and am glad that I did not have to be a part of that. So
I think I think we have time still to keep working to make it a more perfect option. So that's the good news. And also, this is a really unifying, this is a very unifying building to have, so now when you're meeting people and you're talking about what school your kid goes to at the soccer field, you're not like Clark, oh, I guess we can't be friends, or we don't have play dates, or we like you, but we won't see you in school, or, it's just like, it's going to be unifying it's going to be tough, no doubt about it, but it's a really unifying building. And it'll be great. Our kids love coming together in 5th grade and being with the kids that they've grown up with, that are in their neighborhoods, that maybe go to different schools, or in their sporting events or their ballet classes. And this is just the same. This is just putting them together a little earlier in the same way, a really thoughtful way, actually, with the two schools in one. So this is a great opportunity for us.
Well, I want to echo that, because I think, having been a Stanley parent, it was pretty eye-opening for me when I got onto the school committee, and when my kids moved into the middle school, to see how different this town is, and how much more diverse this town is than what it is currently, primarily at Stanley. It's to be able to level the playing field and provide equity. If I were a parent and, with elementary school or soon to be elementary school kids, I'd be, it would be disconcerting to me to think that only a small portion of kids would be benefiting from a new school, for the next generation, because let's face it, it takes a million years to get anything taken care of around here. So the idea of building 2 schools in one, one and done, is, for me, I support it. So now that everybody's had an opportunity on the school committee to say their piece, I'd like to call the question. I don't think I have to say that since I'm the chair, but for a roll call vote, roll call vote. So Suzanne, why don't you do the honors with the first vote?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
John?
No.
And I'm a yes. So the motion passes.
Thank you, everyone.
Vivian and Lee, thank you. Do not feel obliged to stick around while we go through our reports.
Thank
Okay,
you. Have a wonderful
Thank you,
evening.
everybody. Nice hearing from you, and I hope we hear more.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for coming. Thank you.
See you guys tomorrow night at the community forum, 7 o'clock.
Absolutely. Bye, everyone. Have a great
Bye.
night.
Thank you. And so, Superintendent, I'll turn it over to you. You're on mute.
Thank you. I have no written report. My update is based on a few conversations I've had with the chair, and I look forward to following it up tomorrow with another family communication. One of the things that came up after our last meeting that Mrs. O'Connor and I were talking about is the perception of live streaming. And in my layman's education through our Director of Technology, live streaming in our schools would mean an investment in cameras that would follow the teacher around and would be moving with the teacher with multiple monitors on the wall. So that was out of our wheelhouse in terms of finances. But what we are calling live Zooming is something that we've heard feedback from parents and families, why aren't you doing that? And I gave my reasons at the last school committee meeting that, our real focus when we bring those kids back into hybrid next week is establishing routines, establishing safety protocols, and to do both the live Zooming and bring students back would be challenging at best when you figure about 1,000 students coming back in addition to staff. But what I do want to report tonight is that we had a leadership team meeting last week we talked about, and actually this was Friday, piloting some live Zooming and asking for volunteers. And as of today, the high school has 14 teachers that are interested in volunteering to live Zoom with their remote students. At the middle school, Mr. Kalshman is working with the entire math department, grades 5 through 8, that might also jump in and pilot the live Zooming. Is it best practice to sit in front of a screen for 6 hours? It isn't. But we did hear, parents and families wanting a little bit more than what we could offer currently in terms of asynchronous learning with the remote model. And finally, at the elementary right now, I know of 2 volunteers at the Stanley School. We're still waiting to see if there's volunteers at the other elementary schools. But I just did want to put out there to the committee and to the community that we do have teachers interested in piloting this. And what it would basically be, Ms. Mackey-Knowles and myself tested it, is that the computer screen would be facing the teacher and projected on the board, and kids would be basically watching the lesson. It is challenging to monitor those kids at home remotely while you're teaching in person, which is why we're rolling it out as a pilot. We want to poke holes in it the way we've poked holes in the other things that we've been doing in the district. And so I just wanted to put that out there. In addition to that, I think it's important for the committee to know and for the families to know we're still dealing with facilities issues. I met with Director of Facilities Max Casper this morning, and he and I are on the same page in terms of, we have a plan today, Monday, October 19th, and according to the reports that we get this week, we may all have to be flexible and shift. And that means where students might think they're going in terms of their building spaces could potentially change. We just don't know. And I think it's important to put that out there. The facilities department and our director of facility have been working countless hours with our mechanical engineers to get things up to date for October 26th. But we do face challenges still, and we do still have some unknowns. And finally, I think the most important thing I wanted to talk to you about tonight, and I asked Amanda to come to this meeting tonight because she and I met, and there's 2 pieces to moving into hybrid. Obviously, there's the facilities, but most importantly, I'll go back to August or September meeting where Mr. Jantis asked me, are we going to hit our target of October 26th? What would stop us from hitting our target? And at that time, I said it would be the data, or it would be a state agency telling us to do so. And so after a conversation with Mrs. Mulcahy today, we talked about the fact that the numbers are increasing. Swampscott has gone from gray to green, and by the end of this week, will likely be in yellow. And which makes me very concerned about what next week is going to bring in terms of the virus trends. Are we going to become a red community next week? Should we go hybrid, or should we wait another week? And is it this committee's, do I have this committee's support? Because this has always been my intent, that if Swampscott becomes red, I would leave the cohorts in person as they are now. That means the first and second cohorts of high needs students, and I would not bring in those additional 1,000 students and teachers. The cohort we brought in on September 16th would stay. The cohort we brought in on October 5th would stay. But is it worth, with the increasing numbers and the trends the way they are, putting the next group, the 1,000 kids, in on next Monday? I am super excited to get those kids in. And I started to craft to the staff how excited I am. But I have to be very honest, I'm a bit concerned. And I'm going to throw it to Mrs. Mulcahy to see if she has anything to add.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I think that the numbers are very alarming and we're not trending in the right direction. And it's something that needs to be on our radar. With space being kind of tight with students, and we're, doing our best to socially distance each student and staff member. And if our numbers continue to move up, I think that we need to have a really important conversation on what's the safest decision for our students and our faculty, and to also keep our community safe. So, I mean, I sat down with the superintendent and we talked about it, and we're hoping that we can have your support in making this decision, or at least opening up the conversation to what do we do.
I see you, Suzanne. She's a waving.
I can't raise my hand because I have co-host privileges. I think you have my support. However, I really would like to see the teachers who are still thinking of piloting any sort of live streaming to still try to do that. And I would really, really like to see an effort to bring the kindergartners, the first and the second graders in, if no one else, and use the high school or use the buildings that we have to bring those kids in, because I just keep hearing over and over how much more challenging it is for those kids to pay attention, to do their work, to be any sort of self-directed activities. Like, it would be really nice to try to just put them in the high school or the middle school or whatever spaces we can safely put them in as a priority. That would be my preference. And if you had to keep the other kids remote, I mean, it stinks, but I think that there's a lot of good learning happening on for the kids that can handle the self-directed kind of expectations they've been asked. That's all I have.
Yeah. I just think that we need to think of like a firm, like, set limit though. I agree. Like, I personally want kids to go back in. I think it's so important for their education. But the numbers and the data right now are very alarming, and it doesn't look like it's going to get better. Just today I pulled up the data from the CDC, and there was another 157 cases, just in Essex County.
Okay.
But there's 827 in the state. So
I want to show you the Swampscott dashboard that Amanda pulled up for us. Can you all see that?
Yeah.
So if you click on the total classes drop down, total cases in the left, and drop down to the new cases, you can kind of see over the last couple of days, if you click on the October and the little right there, yeah. So those are new lab cases just released last week. So there were 12 new lab cases.
But then a big drop. But then it looks like a big drop.
Well, that's just today's data. So
That's one day.
That's just one
one day
information. This is today.
Okay.
So, this is information that is uploaded by the Board of Health in Swampscott. This is their page. So it's just one of those things that we need to really think about what we're going to do if our numbers keep on climbing.
Do we have any indication about what's behind these numbers? Like, if is it a cluster or a family or at a nursing home, or do we have any information like that?
Unfortunately, we don't have the specifics of it. Sorry, but we are getting more testing done, which can also kind of play into that. But I think that this data is enough to start, questioning what's the safest next few steps. And that's, to me, what the alarming part is. The numbers are not going down, they're going up. So, I guess I'm really looking for, the committee's support on what to do next. At what point do we say, this isn't safe, and we need to make, or this isn't safe, but what do we do now?
So I guess I would agree to some extent with what Suzanne said, which is that if the data shows that we need to slow down, then I would not argue that. But I would I would encourage us I would encourage us to think about, rather than all or nothing, that that maybe we are bringing in a smaller cohort. I don't know if it's kindergarten, first, second. Like a month ago, I felt like that was the absolute must. In talking to a bunch of parents of such young ones, that sounds like it's going great. So I don't know, I don't know who that cohort would be. I would leave that to you and your team, Pam, and your school leaders. But it just seems sort of like, I guess, I was really jolted today by that emergency management text. But I also, and I want to be smart, but I also don't want to, I feel like we know, we keep bracing for this second wave, and I feel like, let's make hay while we can and get some of these kids and create some relationships in person while we can, if that's possible.
Here's my question. They're saying that the next 10 to 12 weeks are going to be very, very challenging health-wise as the common flu comes out. So what is it going to take, again, for us to decide to go fully remote? Are we sticking with the fact that we're waiting for the governor or the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education to make that call? Or are we making a local decision to keep our kids safe? So that's what I'm posing here.
Karen.
So I thought when we were talking before, we said we were going to follow, CDC and the Mass Department of Health. And I mean, I don't know, they change frequently, but I thought their guidance was that unless you were red for like some period of time, like 3 weeks in a row or something, their recommendation was that you do at least some part in person, which is, hybrid is some part in person. But I mean, has that changed?
Was that DPH? Was that DPH or DESE?
I don't know.
Okay.
I think it was DESE. DESE's guidance was you have to have at least 3 weeks to determine a trend. So
I think it's really important. Like Martha Ramey, you said this a long time ago. We're operating as if we're our safety precautions are such that we're operating like assuming everyone has it and is asymptomatic, right? So if they're in the building and they're at least 6 feet apart and they're wearing masks and the mask breaks are outside and we're doing what we can, we shouldn't be transmitting it. Even if you came to school and you're asymptomatic,
I see Amanda shaking her head.
Well, because I know there's all sorts of kids like pull your mask up, and there's all that other stuff we can't control. But it's like I just feel like we have to try to follow the regulations. And
No, I don't think there's a question on not trying. We want to try. But I think we just need to have a clear expectation on what is our limit.
So what I'm hearing, and we have developed, Amanda, you and I have spent a lot of time looking over and coordinating with the DESE guidance. And so we need to check if DESE guidance, and Martha Raymond, you're saying it is a 3-week trend in the red, and then we need to consider what our next step is. That's what I'm hearing people say.
I just don't think any of us are qualified enough. I mean, Amanda aside has the most expertise, but none of us are qualified enough to say something other than what DESE or CDC are telling us. We have to go with the data and the guidance. But I think that making sure our safety protocols are being followed is huge. And then if we have to decrease the number of kids because we're starting to get nervous, we just prioritize who comes back. I mean, I don't see how.
No, I hear what you're saying. I see Martha Cyber's hand up. We were just putting it out for you tonight because Amanda's now with Karen on those emergency management team meetings.
Yeah, I know.
And so, Martha Cyber.
Yeah, I was just going to follow up with what Mrs. Raymond said, that I do think that the guidance is 3 weeks in the red. I know that that's what Salem has done as a school committee and as a board. And I think it was based on the DESI guidance. They were 2 weeks in the red, and then the third week they weren't, and so they didn't need to change their plans at all. But 3 consecutive weeks in the red would change their plans internally. So I do think there might be something in the DESI guidance that supports
I
that.
think it's just you need 3 data points to get a trend, right? You won't have a trend till you get 3.
Right. I mean, you can see that just the trend that Amanda just showed on the Board of Health thing. You see 3 humps going up and then 1 going down. Now we have to wait for those 3 humps going up again. It's like,
Well, that's just today's data, so
no, but
that's not the
I'm looking
weeks.
at
Oh,
July.
yeah.
I'm
Oh.
looking at July, August, and September. I'm seeing it go up through the end of the summer, but then it went down in September, right? So now we're like looking at it going up again. I mean, it's just like the whole thing about establishing a trend. That's all.
Okay, so we have another meeting on the 28th, and so we will likely do some rereading of DESI guidance, CDC, DPH, and come back to you with maybe something to support if it's the 3-week trend.
So if I can add to this, I think, one of the things that we've been talking about, and, we've also been talking about with the teachers in negotiations, is that, like, to some degree, it would not be a surprise if kids were back in school and somebody tests positive, like what happened at the JCC this summer, or what happened at the YMCA this summer.
Every other school.
Yeah, and
Right.
that isn't in and of itself a reason to shut, and a reason for everybody to go remote. So, like, we've always talked about the fact that it's a lot of things. It's not only the map and the number of cases but, like, where are those cases happening? Are those kids? Is it a nursing home? I don't know if we can get that information, but I think it's important. And to say, of 12 people out of, 13,000, what are any of those cases students or children? I don't know, but what I do know is that we've said all along that it is a combination of a lot of things.
Well, Amanda's working very closely with Nia Illingworth. She's working very closely with the school nurses. She's tracking the data. So she's got that information. I just brought it up tonight because I think it's something that you all need to be aware of. In addition, we have done a training of all the custodians of the cleaning protocols. Last week, we had all the custodians and the administrators in attendance and reviewed all of them and reviewed proper PPE equipment, donning and doffing. I've learned doffing. So, we are ready to go. But I would feel remiss if I didn't at least bring that up tonight.
John, do you want to add anything?
You're muted.
No, I agreed with a lot of what Suzanne said about, trying to, focus on, if we can, the younger kids to get them in. I know some of the surrounding communities. I think that's going to be somewhat instructive too, how they've handled some of these previously. I forget which one exactly, but I know there was kind of a spike or a couple positive cases, and within 3 days they were back in school again. They went remote for like 3 days. They found out on a Tuesday, they went remote Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, they were back on Monday. So, it looks like each district is kind of playing it by ear, but not, just kind of taking a reality check of like to your point, Amy, kind of the facts and circumstances of each incident.
Does that, Pam and Amanda, does that help you at all, or?
It gives us some guidance for going back and taking a look at what the school committee voted to support, the guidance the school committee voted to support, and just make sure we have all our ducks in a row. Amanda has been handling, ongoing staffing and building nurses and the lead nurse and the students. So, we have our COVID protocols. Those have gone out to everybody. So I just didn't want to have this meeting and not bring it up. And I also.
And in the absence of information, can I presume that we have had no positive cases with any of at school? with either students or teachers?
I don't know if I can legally say something like that, but our schools are safe right now. But you know, I think that it's not long before it could happen.
Okay,
So it's something to keep on our radar. We want to stay safe. So,
And we are safe right now.
and we are right now.
we want to stay that way.
We want to stay that way.
Okay.
So that's just my update. I think it was important to note that we do have some teachers volunteering to live Zoom. And I think that's going to be an exciting opportunity for our students and our staff, and continue to look at this model as we roll it out. So,
Well, I have to say, Pam, I really appreciate you clearing that up, because I admit when we were talking last Wednesday about live streaming, and even when we've been talking about it in our negotiations with the union, I was equating live streaming with Zoom, and I did not understand what the pushback was on not being able to live stream when we were already, in fact, doing quite a decent job with Zoom. So,
I do think some people use them synonymously. I think we as a leadership team defines them differently, and we now look at them differently. So we'll see.
yeah. So I mean, I think if we could do that, and those kids at home could be having as close to the same experience as their cohort in school, that it could only be a positive.
Well, thank you. That concludes my report for tonight.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Linda.
Okay, so let's we had the policy. I'm going to turn it back over to you, Suzanne, for the policy update. And I know that there was a lot of discussions during the between last week and now. Is that what we're talking about tonight? In
Yeah,
terms of
so
masks?
I'm just gonna share, I'm gonna share the policy right now. Can you see it?
Yep. Well, we can see your screen.
Wait, the policy isn't on it?
No, your policy's on it, but we see like 9,000.
Wait, I don't know how to get, I don't know how to get those off. Hold on.
See all your icons.
I know, it doesn't. Just,
There we go. Sorry to embarrass you.
my kids are like, what are you doing? So we just, when we looked at this more closely, someone emailed the night of the meeting and just said, wait, I think you made a mistake. You don't have indoor, this line right here, indoors during physical education class is not okay, right? And it's because we took it out of here, and then when it was up here, we had it right. Outdoors during physical education class, you could take off your mask. And then for some reason, I don't know why we put it in here, but this should be outdoors during physical education class, not indoors.
So it remains that all indoors all the time are masks.
Yeah, except for indoor during lunch. We said that was okay when there's appropriate physical distancing, but outdoors during physical education class, you can have a mask break. I mean, or take down your mask.
And you can sip water.
Huh?
You
Oh
can
yeah,
sip water.
that's the second part here. Given the appropriate physical distancing, it's acceptable to briefly remove your mask in order to hydrate.
Okay.
But this was like, this should just have been outdoors and not indoors.
Right.
And someone who was watching the meeting caught it, and then we were like, oh, we'll just change it, before we vote on it.
Okay.
So we can vote on this given that change. Or we can vote on the policy as it is with the change from indoors to outdoors during physical education class.
Okay, so can we vote on that tonight?
Yeah.
All right, so I will make a motion to approve with the edits that you have made.
I'll second the motion.
Any discussion on it?
Like, I'm right, Amanda, we don't have to change anything else, right?
So I'm sorry, I just wanted to ask a question. So when you're saying outdoors without the masks, they still have to be socially distancing.
Yeah, so we say
Does it say that? I just can't
Yeah,
read it, so I just
when
wanted to clarify.
when appropriate physical distancing is enforced.
Oh,
They-
okay, sorry. I
So
just couldn't see it.
anytime they have the mask off, that you have to enforce appropriate physical distancing, whether it's outdoors, indoors during lunch, or outdoors during physical education class.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so, yeah. That was just an oops. That's why we have a first read and we find the mistakes.
Awesome. All right, so a roll call vote. John,
Yes.
Suzanne,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Amy is a yes, the motion passes. So that is approved.
All right.
Right. Suzanne, anything else? Any other, are we going to look at those other, or are they for the next committee meeting?
Wait, I'm looking at the,
I'm looking at the,
oh, that was all part of, it was one policy. The EBC-S was the supplemental, all the COVID related ones. And oh, I see what you're saying. So you're right. We just looked at that was just face covering. So nothing's changed. Nothing's changed for JLCB, and both those policies are actually part of the EBC policy. Like they're like sub policies in there. So we don't have to vote JLCB. We can just vote for the EBC, the supplemental policy as a whole, and that will include bullet I and double I.
okay. So then let's take another vote. So if I could have a motion to approve policy EBCS supplemental.
Make the motion.
Do I have a
Yeah.
second?
All right, so you guys understand that just includes all the COVID related things, the inoculation, the flu vaccination thing we were talking about last time,
Mhm.
and the face covering that we just voted for.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so a roll call vote. John,
Yes.
Suzanne,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
and I am a yes. So the motion passes. So with that, I promised everybody that this would be a short meeting. It was a little bit longer than I anticipated.
Wait a minute, you have one item, Madam Chair? The,
Oh, my goodness. Thank you for catching that. We have okay. So if I am to understand this, I got an email today. Pardon me. Pam, thank you for catching that.
Sure.
This it relates to the MASC and the upcoming vote that they're having. And because it is being held on Zoom, they need us to elect a delegate and an alternative delegate for anybody who attends and plans on representing and voting. So I guess the immediate question is anybody planning on attending the MASC conference?
Is this like, we don't always send delegates to the conference?
In fact, I'm not sure we ever have.
Yeah, I don't think we have.
I was not intending to go to it.
Nor was I.
I mean, I can look into it, but I wasn't planning to. How soon do they need an answer?
They need an answer by the end of the month. So I'm going to make the motion that should anybody attend, unless John speaks up and says otherwise, I would nominate Karen as our delegate.
You have to do it, right? That just means if I go, I'll be, yeah, okay, I'll take it. Yes, give it to me.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor? John,
Yes.
Suzanne,
Yes.
I am a yes. And Karen?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Karen is our delegate for the MS.
And do you need a backup delegate too? Is that what you said?
No, we're just gonna send. We'll just have one.
Okay. I mean, it's probably, I saw yeah, whatever. I saw it. Nothing was really speaking to me, but their list of events.
Okay, so taking care of that.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Huh?
Come on, John, I know you want it.
I beat him.
I'll second. I thought I was on mute, but yes, I'll second.
Okay, roll call vote. John,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Suzanne,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. So it is 8:53. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for coming in on a Monday night. Very much
Thank
appreciated.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you
night.
guys. Thanks for voting. Where's my Zoom?
So Ethan, I just stopped the record to the cloud. Do I stop the live stream as well? Sure.
Sorry about that, Amy. Go again.
I just stopped the record. Now do I hit stop live stream?
Nope, I shut it down on my end, so you should be okay to leave the meeting whenever you're done now.
Terrific. Okay.
All right, good night.
Good night.
Night.